Welcome to the AV1611 Hour. I'm going to continue preaching this summation of the future state. Psalm 33:18. Behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope in his mercy, to deliver their soul from death, and to keep them alive in famine. Our soul waiteth for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. The eye of the Lord is upon who? Those that don't fear him and reject him their whole lives, die and then go to hell. Is there anywhere in either testament that it teaches the Lord's real concerned about those that have hated him their whole lives? Does it show a weeping, anguished God? He says he takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked. I'll grant that. God doesn't take pleasure in the death of the wicked. Certainly not. But at the same time, I don't find any place where he's making a personal house call, a personal visit to the netherworld to redeem souls out of hell that had every chance here to do it and didn't do it. In fact, the longer they lived, the more hardened their hearts became against him. Yeah. Jacob have I loved, but what? Esau have I hated. And that was spoken by Paul, was applied to the boys before they were born. God hated Esau before he was ever born. This is a very, very hated doctrine. These things are all wrapped up with the doctrines of grace and the schematic plan of God. And I use that word schematic because God had a plan before man was ever formed or before the world ever was to redeem sinners. And the plan was his son would come down here and die for his people to redeem them, to save them from their sins. It's always a particular redemption. It's peculiar to a certain set of people, and they're identified as sheep. They're identified as those that hear his voice. And the psalmist said in Psalm 17, notice there, Psalm 33, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope in his mercy. When do you hope in it? It's upon them that are here. It's those that are alive to deliver their soul from death. Is that just physical death? No. That's to deliver them when they die physically. Their spirits still live and they live in a state of grace. Psalm 17:15. As for me, I will behold thy face in righteousness. I shall be satisfied when I awake with thy likeness. The expectation of the righteous person is to someday be given a resurrection body and to rise up in a perfected resurrection body that's holy, pure, and clean, and the spirit which longed and longed to be free of the corrupt flesh will be given a new flesh that is of one mind with the Spirit and perfect before God. Luke 12:8, 9, and 10. Is there any place that says there's no forgiveness for certain people that do certain things? See, these people say there's absolute hope for everybody. Like, there's a chance for Judas. How about him? If you're going to have the people before the flood, give them a chance. Well, it wouldn't be fair if you didn't give Judas a chance. How about Saul, who consorted with a woman with a familiar spirit and then killed himself? And I could keep going. I could make a huge list. How about Bar Jesus? How about these apostates in the New Testament that were named by Paul? Well, God's mercy's got to extend to them all because God is love, and it's contrary to his nature for him to punish people. He's punishing people down here right now. Be sure your sin will find you out, here now and hereafter. My. How autistic, how stupid and dumb and hard of hearing are people that they don't understand that forever means forever. When he got rid of everlasting hell, everlasting damnation, everlasting shame and contempt, I think he blotted his name out of the Lamb's Book of Life. That could explain it right there. But look at this. Luke 12:8, 9, and 10. Also I say unto you, whosoever shall confess me when? Before men. Where is that? Here on the earth. Him shall the Son of Man also confess before the angels of God. Who? Those that confess Christ before men, they're confessed by Christ to the angels in the presence of God. But he that denieth me before men shall be not denied before the angels of God. How much clearer do you get? Next verse. But whosoever shall speak a word against the Son of Man, it shall be forgiven him. But unto him that blasphemeth against the Holy Ghost, it shall not be forgiven. Okay, there you go. Right there is a sin that's called unpardonable. And he's just talking about denying men who wouldn't confess him before men, and denying those men before the angels of God. And then he warns against a sin that is unpardonable. If it's unpardonable, then you can't get out of the consequences of it. And if you can't get out of the consequences of it, then you must suffer the penalty for committing it. Right? When is the time to get out of the consequences of your sin? It's in this world. Now, you might think this is peculiar, or someone might say it's peculiar, but go to Numbers chapter 16 for a minute. In this passage in the Old Testament, in the history of Moses and the people of Israel, it's very plain. You want to see, but this was a quick one, okay? Because judgment or sentence against an evil work is not speedily executed. The heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. But Numbers 16:28, Moses said, Hereby ye shall know that the Lord hath sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of mine own mind. Numbers 16:29, If these men die the common death of all men, or if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then the Lord hath not sent me. In other words, if they grow old, one has an accident and stumbles and falls, one drowns, one dies of old age, another one becomes a leper and dies. No, that's the common death of all men. The Lord hath not sent me. But if the Lord make a new thing, and the earth open her mouth and swallow them up with all that appertain unto them, and they go down quick, that means quick means they're still living, into the pit, then ye shall understand that these men have provoked the Lord. And it came to pass. Now, can you imagine? I want you to think in your mind, try to have the mentality of these preachers that teach these damnable heresies. You've got to put these damnable heresies next to these men. God caused the earth to open up and swallow them and all that pertained to them. Their families went right down into hell. Went right down to death and damnation. Oh, you said the families. Okay, just let's let the men. That's what it says there. It came to pass, as he made an end of speaking all these words, that the ground clave asunder that was under them, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their houses, and all the men that appertained unto Korah, and all their goods. They went down quick into the pit, because they did what? Provoked the Lord. Now, can you imagine some preachers saying, and then the Lord sent Jesus down there to talk to them, and show them the error of their ways, after they had a hard time for many, many centuries of torment, sent him down there and said, hey, look, don't you realize I was going to show up and die for you? Does that even make sense? God killed them physically. The Bible talks about a second death. These people can't deal with this. There's no way to get yourself out of the box in their position. You end up with easy believism, no heaven, no hell, all is well, and just one foppery, foolishness, and stupid religion. And that's what Christianity without heaven, without hell, church without Christ, that's what it is. And that's what they're all doing out there. When there's no standards, when there's no rules, when there's no boundaries, when there's no order, there's nothing but confusion. You know, sinners love confusion because nobody's paying attention to them when they're doing their thing in the middle of a bunch of confusion. But let there be clarity, let there be strength, let there be understanding, let there be wisdom, and let there be light. They don't like that. So, they all, and that all that pertained to them, went down into the pit. And all Israel that were round about them fled at the cry of them. For they said, lest the earth swallow us up also. And there came out a fire from the Lord. First the ground opens up and swallows all these people. Then the men that had the censers and were swinging them, fire came down out of heaven and burned them up. Do you think, this guy in this book here, his argument is that there's always occupation and there's always work for the saints to do. And we'll be occupied and we'll be busy after we get out of these corrupt bodies and we're in a spiritual body without our resurrection body, there's going to be all kinds of work for us to do, to work going down to hell and preach to the people to convert them. That's the kind of stuff they teach. Is that nuts or what? I have every right to be angry. I'm sure these guys that wrote this stuff, these books were written in the early 1900s, I'm sure they know the error of their ways now. And I would hate to be in their position. I would hate to have to be accountable for something like that. But God sent fire down, burned up 250 people, destroyed Korah, Dathan, and their company. The ground opened up underneath their tents, swallowed them up whole. There's nothing like that anywhere else that ever happened in the world on that scale in a religious confrontation between good and evil, between the Lord and his enemies. Now, you think, is it wise? Is it think, okay, he was mad then, but he calmed down?
Yeah.
Remember what I've quoted this a lot, and some can say I take this out of context, but whatsoever God doeth, it shall be forever. He hated them. They provoked him. He killed their bodies. But you know where their spirits are? And where their resurrected bodies with their rotten spirits put back into them are going to go? Hell and death were cast into the lake of fire. That's what it says. Now, 2 Corinthians 6:1, we then as workers together with him beseech you also that you receive not the grace of God in vain. 2 Corinthians 6:2, for he saith, I have heard thee in a time accepted, and in the day of salvation have I succored thee. Behold, now is the accepted time. Now is the day of salvation. As a chef, I always talk to cooks about a sense of urgency. You need to have a sense of urgency about your spiritual welfare. Well, guess what? When there's no everlasting torments, there's no everlasting damnation, there's no everlasting hell, the sense of urgency disappears, doesn't it? Yeah. When I was converted to Christ, when I became born again, I was persuaded for months that I was worthy to go to hell, and that there was no sin that I wouldn't do if God didn't stop me from doing it. I became persuaded of my absolute, utter incapacity to do anything right, and the possibility of doing absolutely every wrong there was to do. I became persuaded of all those things without listening to any Calvinistic preacher, but just from reading the King James Bible and staying home alone with the book. Because when I was staying home alone with the book, I was staying home alone with God. I became persuaded that there was no good thing in me. And that if I didn't find Christ, and if I didn't get to him and be with him, if I didn't somehow make peace with God, I was going to burn in hell forever. I became persuaded of that the first time in about 1977. When I heard street preachers. I knew what they were saying was true. Something told me, and I just knew for sure. It's like when I met the Satanist one day, and I said to him, I said, you have a problem with God the Father? No. And I asked him, how about God the Son, Jesus Christ? He said, I hate him! I hate him! I would like to kill him! I said, you mean he's alive? He said, yes, he's alive! And I can't stand him! That's what the Satanist said to me. The Lord's whispered to me, see, Jesus is real. Jesus is real. Why did I get all that? Because God wanted to bring me in his own way in his own time. It's happened to every one of you one way or another, something like that. You know, it's crazy. These people just are out of their minds. They're completely without any foundation, without any basis or rule of life at all. Acts 10:34 and 35. Then Peter opened his mouth and said, of a truth I perceive that God is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him.